Brett Kavanaugh was supposed to be an easy win for Republicans ahead of the midterms, but after a former classmate accused him of a decades-old sexual assault, Kavanaugh's hearing will be anything but. 5 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are up for re-election in November, and how they handle Blasey Ford's testimony will be in sharp focus. Democratic strategist Jeff Garin put it this way to the Washington Post, quote, "This is not just Kavanaugh that is on trial. It is the Republican majority that is on trial. There is certainly a significant danger for Republicans if they are seen as railroading the nomination through at this stage or not providing a real public airing of the facts." For more on all of this, Leslie Sanchez is a Republican strategist and CBS News contributor, and Joel Payne is a Democratic strategist. They both join me from Washington. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Leslie, I'm going to start with you. How has the Kavanaugh controversy changed the conversation ahead of midterms?
It really has, in the most dramatic way, and I think in a way that certainly the GOP was not prepared to respond to. I think that if you look at the fact that the default response was to vehemently defend Kavanaugh, and now as time is changing, now that we have a face and a name, I think the ground is shifting under the GOP, especially when it comes to suburban women and women voters. You're seeing a different type of reaction. This is something, Tanya, that's definitely going to be dividing among gender lines. And a lot of the women I've been speaking to, especially in battleground states, have personal experiences with sexual assault. They're really cautious about having a kind of an immediate response to have a confirmation hearing because they want to know more. They want the opportunity for at least the Judiciary Committee to hear in her own words Dr. Ford's allegations and her response.
Yeah, Joel, what do you think? I mean, we keep hearing how the female voter is going to be pivotal in the midterm. So what do you think about how the conversation is changing?
Yeah, I think the optics are all off for Republicans. So if you just consider the fact that this all-male panel of Republicans can really control the fate here. And I think that has to be an unsettling reality for Leslie and for a lot of Republicans out there who want to see their party prevail this November. I just think, again, the optics and the atmospherics are off. There's a lot of women who have experiences like Christine Blasey Ford. There are a lot of women who are going to be voting this November who know exactly that story that she's told. And so I think what Democrats have been doing really since Donald Trump has been elected, because, again, while this is isolated about Kavanaugh, this is a part of a longer narrative about Republicans and their attitudes towards women. The president is through the floor, no more than 30% with women. He is severely underwater when it comes to women voters. So I would argue it's more of a continuation of a bad trend that started with the Trump inauguration, and it has continued, and this is a low watermark for sure.
And so, Leslie, sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to say that line of thinking is the saving grace for the Republican Party. The overreaching by the Democrats to try to tie all this in a very nice little bow and even wrap it as part of the Me Too movement, I think it really trivializes how significant and how distinct this particular issue is. Even if we look at it in the most recent kind of public context, and I'm going to use the Catholic Church, for example, you have so many victims coming forward that 30 years ago are reliving this type of victimization. Those types of reports are held right next to this particular instance. So I think that's the context that now America's kind of grappling with how to address it, how people review and feel about that issue. I wouldn't say this is the larger pall by which, or brush by which we judge the Trump administration, their economy, and other issues both male and female voters are going to be voting on in November.
So you would silo it a little bit, Leslie.
Yeah, I really would. I mean, it's so distinct and deserves that respect.
And I wouldn't. I don't think you can silo it. This is a party that nominated Donald Trump for president, okay? So you can't divorce yourself from that reality. This is a party that has decided to put forward Supreme Court nominees that are hostile to women's rights, to reproductive rights. These are issues that women hold near and dear. This is a party that had an inauguration that was small in comparison to the Women's March, okay? You can't divorce those realities from each other. And I think that's important to consider.
Joel is right. He was already unpopular when it came to worries over where he stood on Roe v. Wade, right? So we've already got sort of one woman's issue, if you want to call it, and then this happens. So I mean, let's just talk about the Kavanaugh nomination for a moment, regardless of midterms. Leslie, you know, this was supposed to be an easy win for the president going into midterms. It was supposed to be a success for Republicans ahead of November. When does the party start to get worried about the nomination itself?
I think the party should be really worried right now. And that's a hard thing to say as a Republican on this panel. But I tell you, this is distinctly different. And it is because not only the context of this conversation has changed. I can't tell you how many people feel like there was this sex-shaming culture that was very much a part of the national conversation that's changed now. And there's so many more women who feel their daughters, their aunts, their sisters, they themselves have experienced things that they don't want to relive. And they question, why would a woman like this come forward now? What is in her best interest? What could she possibly gain? And they're willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, to owe her that respect, to have a private, they would prefer in many cases, a private conversation she has with Judiciary Committee to air her accusation and her recollection, and certainly give the judge an opportunity to give his. But to take the political atmosphere, it's very difficult in this political atmosphere. And Republicans want the win, right? They want that other very conservative jurist on the Supreme Court. But this is one of those issues I think they have to be extremely careful and respectful how they move forward.
Right. It will be a win at what cost, ultimately.
Exactly.
So, Joel, on Thursday, Democratic senators came forward in support of Blasey Ford. Do you think they're overplaying their hand before the hearing even takes place?
No, I don't. I think what Democratic senators want is for this woman to be able to tell her story and to tell it completely in a comfortable setting and not turn it into what happened with Anita Hill 25 plus years ago when she was victimized nationally. I think Democrats want to avoid a repeat of that. And I think actually, you know, Democrats feel like the remedy that Ms. Blasey Ford recommended with having an FBI investigation makes sense, to have a partisan investigation run by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Actually, along with not helping ensure what, you know, that Christine Blasey Ford, her story is told, it also does not help Judge Kavanaugh. If Brett Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court, this will cast a pall over his entire time on the court. So it actually serves his benefit to have that seen out as well. And I think Democrats are in the right here.
But Joel, let me follow up on that. How does this change the calculus for red state Democrats who maybe were under pressure to vote for Kavanaugh? Is that pressure off now?
No, I don't think it does. I think that pressure still exists. But listen, I would just challenge, you know, the Joe Manchins of the world, the Joe Donnellys of the world, the Heidi Heitkamps. You know, if you actually think that because you vote for a very flawed candidate and a very unpopular candidate for Donald Trump, if that means that they're going to call off the dogs on you in those states. I have not seen any historical data, or I've not seen any electoral data that would suggest that. And so I think that each of those folks have to make that determination for themselves. Claire McCaskill came out this week and already said that she's going to oppose the nomination, that she's seen enough. I think that they're probably doing the politically prudent thing to wait and see how this goes. I think Collins and Murkowski, what they decide to do will probably ultimately indicate what those red state Democrats end up doing, because that math will be determined by what a Collins or what a Murkowski, what a Flake, what a Lindsey Graham, what folks like that decide to do.
Okay, so Leslie, as you know, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley has set a Friday deadline for Ford to submit testimony. Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York is accusing him of bullying Ford. Is there concern among Republicans that the vote is being rushed too quickly?
You know, there certainly is that concern that's there. We all understand that it is basically to do this before the midterms. There's always been an agenda that's never been hidden in trying to move this process along. Each side is accusing the other of politicizing this, and somewhere the truth is right in the middle. And I think that's going to be the challenge for who you fundamentally believe, which is why it really would behoove Dr. Ford to come forward in a private session, whichever she's most comfortable in, and really air her side of this and give the judge an opportunity to respond so that the committee can feel that it's heard and see which they rely as credible. But I don't think, as much as we wanted to discount this as something 30 years ago or this and that, on an issue like a potential sexual assault, I don't think we have the luxury of saying, no, their mind and their memory is flawed. I think we have to give it much more respect.
I agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. And Leslie, Republicans have been somewhat short on legislative wins, but they do tout their reshaping of the judiciary as a winning issue. How does the Kavanaugh accusation complicate that as a political issue?
Well, it's a political issue. If this is a failed nomination, then obviously it's going to have a ripple effect. But these are the types of questions they're going to be the standard, I think, moving forward. We can't deny that. That's already shaped how the court is going to be shaken out, and it probably should. It benefits everybody, right. And it holds everyone to a higher standard. And I don't think that's anything that becomes political. It may be inconvenient, but ultimately, I think more Americans would fundamentally agree.
So a final question to both of you. If this hearing is indeed held in public, how would you advise committee members to handle the hearing? What kinds of questions should they be asking? Joel, let's start with you.
They should be seeking the truth. And a part of that, by the way, is having witnesses that can account for that. I think it's a terrible mistake if Republicans decide to line up behind the idea of Mark Judge, who is a very key witness here, deciding to take a step back. While I think it's important that Ms. Blasey Ford and obviously Judge Kavanaugh tell their story, I think if there were firsthand accounts, those have to be gotten out. What Republicans here, for their own self-interest, need to focus on is getting the truth out, because if any voter, particularly female voters, feel like they are stacking the deck against Christine Blasey Ford, they'll be hell to pay this November at the ballot box.
Leslie, would you like to weigh in on how this hearing should proceed?
Sure, and I think conversely it's the same way. If it looks like it's immediately trying to prove some sort of guilt on behalf of the judge, on Judge Kavanaugh, I think that it has a reverse effect. So the problem is it's extremely politicized in a political arena, and that's not a fair way to air this out. As much as the public wants to be part of this, this is a very unique situation. We've seen and have past experience on that, and I think they have to realize just how politically charged it already is going in.
Some have suggested the senators should not be doing the questioning, that lawyers should be doing the questioning. What do you think of that?
Senators have a motivation. I mean, we're trying to move an agenda forward. These hearings are very tough. You prepare for a very long time because they're rough and tumble kind of environments.
Joel, what do you think? Should the senators themselves be questioning both Blasey Ford and Kavanaugh?
The Senate that I worked in 2005, I would feel more comfortable with that. Today's Senate, I'm not so sure. I think there's going to be more grandstanding, and probably, frankly, on both sides, even Democrats, than there is real questioning. But I reiterate my point earlier. It would behoove everybody to put that to the side and to really focus on getting to the core issue here, because this is actually something that Americans are watching, because it's something that's very prudent and very direct to their lives. And I think a lot of people, identify with Christine Blasey Ford's story, and I don't think people want to see a dirty process here.
Absolutely. All right, Leslie Sanchez and Joel Payne in Washington, thanks to both of you.